Hello again, Steve here. I notice there's been a lot of talk lately, in certain circles anyways, about freedom. Probably always have. There probably always has been, right? Because it's one of those things that almost all creatures want. We try to contain an animal and it wants to get out. We try to get it to do something that it doesn't want to do and it wants to run away. We try to put a cat into a cage, doesn't want to go in. And we're like that too. I mean, we have our preferences. And more and more I'm coming to see them as preferences, really. I mean, do we really have rights? I don't know. If I had the right to life, in a way like an ironclad right to life, how is it that somebody could kill me or take it away, right? That wouldn't seem possible. So we don't really have rights, it seems like that. Do we have freedom? Do we have it? Some people say we're born free. I don't know, I've examined that one too, and it doesn't seem to be the case. I mean, a child at a very young age might want to try to grab at a knife on the edge of the table, and mom goes, oh, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. The child wants to. It doesn't know there's a danger, of course. Doesn't know why the mom doesn't want him to. But he doesn't really have complete freedom. So what he does have, even though the mother grabbed his hand and brought it down, he does have the preference within him. He prefers to grab it, but he's just not able to because he's taken down. So I think that's one thing we can say that we have, and Stefan Molyneux does a great job of presenting that one. But within this whole context, it's all right to call it probably a freedom movement. It's this tendency to people want greater movement, and it always happens during a Renaissance time of usually great technological changes. We see, the fall of the Christian lock on everybody's life, the Protestant Reformation, and this, which is like a new technology in a way, this idea of being able to, printing press, print the Bible, everybody can read it. And of course, then there was the Industrial Revolution, which led to the American Enlightenment period. And we saw great thinkers who would talk about liberty and constitutions within a republic. These were gestures of freedom, right? Same with the French Revolution. And we have this great information revolution that's been taking place for the last 20, 30 years. And it's led to a new form of media, a freedom of media, because it's an alternative. There's not just the vetted information getting out there anymore as there was 20, 30 years ago. There's lots of alternative news media on the internet. People are getting in touch with these ideas about freedom and so on. It's starting to come back. It's a new renaissance happening in that whole field. Yet, many of us still have this religious belief in authority just because we call it authority. But if we really want to consider it, and although it's about considering and learning about ourselves, not necessarily acting on it, because we could get ourselves in big trouble until we're prepared, right? Unless we're prepared to start a revolution, a fighting revolution, which to me doesn't really solve anything because it just replaces an old regime with a new regime. So that's not the goal either. But the internal revolution is that of enlightenment, or of waking up, self-knowledge, this sort of thing. But I think a couple of good questions to ask within ourselves is, first of all, does anybody own me? Right? See, in the time of slavery, the concept was, I'm a slave of that guy. And therefore, well, he owns me. And what he says I'm supposed to do, I have to do it. He has the right to do whatever he wants to me, or has the legal right to do whatever he wants to me, as the same way that, if I was to own a cat or a dog, and or a horse, if it doesn't go in that direction, I can make it go in that direction any way I can. But if we ask ourselves, so that's kind of a foreign concept now, but yet it's something to ask. Does anybody own me? If the answer is no, then being obliged to do something because somebody said so or a whole bunch of people said so on that account is false. The next thing to ask, of course, is am I under contract to anybody to behave in a certain way? And the answer is probably yes. For example, if you're employed, if I'm employed, we have an employment contract which says that I'm going to get paid, or you're going to get paid, and in exchange, there's the performance of duties, right? So if I'm not doing the duty, I can be called to task, or if you're not doing the duty, you can be called to task, in that you agreed to do this and this and this. But in lots of other areas of our lives, is there an agreement in place? Do we have something written down between parties? I'm not saying a social contract, that's something somebody made up. Social contract is, well, show me where I agreed to it, you know? And that wouldn't stand up in any other contract law dispute. Oh, you know, did you or did you not agree to pay the full amount for this car? And the car seller says, well, there's a social contract that he has to. Well, hang on a second. Social contract? No. Is there a contract between you and him that says that he's going to pay it? That's a contract. There's elements of contract. You can look them up. I studied them once. But there has to be exchange of value. There has to be a written document where at least two sides have signed it, agreed to it, and make it stronger, witness it. There has to be full disclosure. There has to be full comprehension and so on. There's a few elements to it. But of course, the social contract, there's none of that. It's just one of those platitudes that people throw out there to shame people into doing stuff. Doesn't exist. But one may have a contract. So that's the good question to ask. Do I have a contract? And the last one that's important is, have I harmed anybody or am I harming anybody? So for example, if I'm beating somebody up on the side of the street and you come along, well, you can impose your will upon me. It doesn't matter that you don't own me. It doesn't matter that there's no contract between you and I. It's just common sense, right? I mean, if I'm beating up a kid on the side of the road, and you see that, it's within your full moral capacity to do what you can to stop that. You don't need my agreement to it, etc. Or if you had seen me doing that, and then you saw me an hour later, buying a bag of chips at the grocery store or something, you can do that in the same way that any peace officer does, right? Going around with a picture, have you seen this guy? Have you seen this guy? Have you seen this guy? And if somebody does, then they go see him and then arrest him, right? So, aside from that, if you're just minding your own business, you haven't harmed anybody, you're not harming anybody, you have no contract to do with anything that you're doing at the moment, and nobody owns you, then what does anybody have on you? But see, many times, the whole system, this feudal remnants of a feudal system that we have in most areas, there's the presumption that you're somebody's bitch always. Like there's this queen somewhere who's called a sovereign, and you're supposed to be a subject or a president or something, or a country, or it's this phantom, right? That's put up on high, and you're supposed to be subject to that just because you were born. That's the presentation. But to throw that out, throw the legitimacy of that out, that religious construct, to be able to throw that out, all we have to do is ask ourselves, do I own me, or does the queen own me, or does somebody else own me? And logic says, well, if anybody's going to own me, surely it's got to be me. At least that's who's got the greatest claim. Maybe it's God, but God is irrelevant in that equation most of the time, right? Except the queen thinks she's part of God, but that's for another story. And am I under any kind of a contract to perform in a certain way? Yeah, at work, But if I'm sitting at home or I'm out walking around, out having a beer, walking along the sidewalk, somebody says, well, you can't do that. Oh, really? Is there a contract between you and I? Or, so the legitimacy starts to fall apart. Now, the guns are still real, the handcuffs are still real, all that's still real, but the legitimacy in our mind, right? We begin to see it not just as some sort of a moral, virtuous organization. We see it as either a band of bandits or just ignoramuses with guns and handcuffs. And the final question, have I harmed anybody? Or am I harming somebody? And if all of those three, in my opinion, maybe there's more, but if there is, post some ideas down below. If all of those three are cleared, I do in fact owe myself hired anybody else. I'm not under any contract. I have not harmed anybody. I'm not harming anybody at the time. Then the legitimacy of any force against me is completely gone in my mind, in any rational man or woman's mind. It's just, injustice. The more we can get this kind of thing out to as many people as we can, begin to break down this religious idea that just because we exist, we are subject. As men and women, we are subject to other men and women, just because we exist. Once we're able to throw that out, realize there is legitimate times that we are subject, agreeing to something, and if we've harmed somebody, somebody has a claim then on our, somebody has a claim on our debt of injuring somebody. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. That's common law, basically, right? In all areas of life, in all societies that have ever existed. If somebody beats somebody up over the head, everybody knows that, they get a sense, an inner sense of who's at fault, who owns that debt of injury. What do you think? I think it's time to speak up about these things and to try to get a grasp of them and to share them. Because society will evolve, and we humans will evolve in our thinking the more we consider this and the more we see it as logical. And we can then sort out legitimate authority and illegitimate authority in our mind first. Steve here again. It's great chatting. Talk again soon. Bye-bye for now.